Praise the Lord, everyone, and welcome to this week's devotional video. In Genesis chapter 15, God promised Abram children as the stars in the sky. Abram, who had been to this point childless, is given a tremendous promise of God. When we turn the page to Genesis chapter 16, we find that the promise has been a long time in coming. And that's where we're going to pick up today. We're going to begin reading in Genesis chapter 16. We're going to read verses 1 through 4. And we read, Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children, and she had a handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said unto Abram, Behold now, the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. And he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. Okay, pause there a minute. Abram and Sarai have been waiting on this promise for a long time. Sarai is starting to give up hope a little bit. She gets the idea, hey, maybe the promise will come through Hagar. Maybe Abram, if you take her, maybe if you can get her pregnant, maybe the promise will come through her. Maybe this will be the will of God. Maybe this is how it happens. Abram says, okay. Abram takes Hagar as a wife, and Sarai's plan works. Hagar gets pregnant. And then Hagar starts to get a little bit of an attitude. Maybe she's strutting around a little bit and, look at me, Sarai. I'm pregnant. I am. Me. I'm pregnant. Abram had no trouble getting me pregnant, Sarai. Maybe the problem is with you. Hagar got an attitude, and Sarai wasn't having it. Verse 5. And Sarai said unto Abram, My wrong be upon thee. I like how that works. Abram, I did wrong, and it's all your fault. I have given my maid into thy bosom. And when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between me and thee. But Abram said unto Sarai, Behold, thy maid is in thy hand. Do to her as it pleaseth thee. And when Sarai dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. Sarai wasn't having it. Sarai saw Hagar strutting around, all proud, all cool, all confident, and Sarai popped her bubble real quick. She walked up to her and said, What are you doing strutting around like this? You are not the one with the promise. You are not the will of God. You're a mistake. That's all you are, Hagar. You are a mistake. That's it. And Hagar ran. Hagar got out of there. As Christians, we try our level best to do the will of God. But let's be honest, we don't always get it right. We fumble, we fall, we fail, we make mistakes. We can be absolutely dead certain that we are in the will of God. Everything looks just right, everything lines up, and we can still be completely wrong. It happens sometimes. It happens. We make the wrong call, we make bad decisions, we make mistakes. And sometimes when we make those mistakes, we deal hardly with them. Oh, I was so stupid. I was so ignorant. I was so foolish. What was I thinking? Sometimes other people deal hardly with us. Other people will call us out. Oh, I thought you were in the will of God. What happened? And God forbid we ever be the ones to call out someone else who's honestly trying their best to live for God and they get it wrong. We should be the ones to lift them up, to encourage them, to help them take the next step. Anyway, Sarai dealt hardly with Hagar, and Hagar ran. Hagar couldn't face her authority figure. How often do we mess up? We fail the will of God. We had everything lined up, but then we find out we're wrong, and all at once, we are afraid to face God. We are afraid to talk to Pastor about it. Maybe we're afraid to talk to our husband or to our wife or to our parents. We were sure we were right, we got it wrong, and now we want to hide. Friends, we're not supposed to hide. We make mistakes, and God can still work with those mistakes. Genesis 16, verses 7 through 11. And the angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, whence camest thou? And whither wilt thou go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Return to thy mistress, and submit thyself under her hands. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. Wait, what? Hagar's being blessed? Hagar wasn't the one the promise was given to. Hagar was the one who was out of the will of God. Hagar was the one who was the mistake. But God can still bless our mistakes. God can still work even when we misunderstand the will of God, even when we take a step in the wrong direction, even when we get off course a little bit. God can still work with that. It's not time to run. It is not time to hide. There is still a blessing in there if we will return to God, if we will submit to his authority. Time goes on. In Genesis chapter 17, God changes the name of the old couple to Abraham and Sarah. We're not going to get into all that, but it's just a symbol of the promise that God made. God reminds Abraham of that promise, and he reaffirms that Sarah is going to be the one to bear him a son. Ishmael will still be blessed. God does reassure Abraham of that, but the promise comes through Sarah. Fast forward to Genesis 21. Give me just a moment to turn there. Here we go. In Genesis chapter 21, beginning at verse 1. And the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Here it is. Here is the moment that Abraham and Sarah have been waiting for years, literally for decades. Sarah has her son. God kept his word, the way he always does. Isaac grows, and the day that he's done nursing, Abraham makes a big feast, cooks up the best calf, makes the best food, invites all the friends and neighbors, but there's drama at the party. Genesis 21, beginning at verse 9. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. Sarah's not having it. Sarah sees her past mistake. She sees a symbol of her past mistake, and all she can see is a mockery of the will of God. And now that Sarah is in the presence of her promise, she has absolutely no mercy for her mistake. How often are we like that? How often do we look at the times that we fumble, the times we fail, the times we mess up, and we get hard on ourselves. We deal hardly with ourselves, and we want to pull back from the presence of God. We want to keep away from people in church. We want to keep away from pastor. Because now that the blessing's here, we can't have this reminder of our mistakes going along with it. Sarah's not going to deal with this reminder of her mistake. So Sarah says, it's got to go. It's got to go. Skip down to verse 14. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a bottle of water and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder and the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. And the water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under one of the shrubs. And she went and sat her down over against him a good way off, as it were a bowshot. For she said, Let me not see the death of the child. And she sat over against him and lifted up her voice and wept. Think how hard this had to be for Hagar. Hagar was called a mistake once. She was cast out once before. God stepped in. God said, You know what? I'm going to bless you anyway. You're going to have a multitude of children anyway. And maybe Hagar walked all that moment saying, You know what? Maybe I am part of the promise. Maybe there is room for me. Maybe I can go alongside the blessing when it comes. Now here she is, rejected again. She's called a mistake again. She's cast out again. And maybe now all she's thinking is, okay, this is it. I guess I'm a mistake after all. I guess I failed after all. I guess I'm not in the will of God after all. And now, God, I'm just going to set down my child here. I don't want to see the death of the child. I don't want to see the death of the blessing. I don't want to see the death of the promise. How often do we get to that point, friends? How often do we fall down again? We make the mistake again. We fail the will of God again, and we think it's over. We think that's it. I can't be blessed. I can't receive the promise. God has nothing for me. Friends, God has something for you. God has something for you. He has a blessing for you. He has a promise for you. He sees you. He is not forgotten. Verse 17. And God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven, and said unto her, What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and filled the bottle with water, and gave the lad drink. And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness, and became an archer. And he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. We'll stop there. Friends, we're all human. None of us live a perfect Christian life. We fall. We fail. We make mistakes. When that happens, have mercy on your mistake. Have mercy on yourself. It's not time to run from the presence of God. It's not time to hide away. God sees you. He hears you. He knows you. He cares for you. And even in your mistakes, there's a blessing for you. Your blessing is going to live. Your promise is going to live. God has not forsaken you. He has not forgotten you. He has not abandoned you. He is still reaching out to you saying, Here, get up. Walk with me. Talk with me. Trust me. Embrace your mistakes as part of the learning process, as part of the growing process. Don't beat yourself up over them. We all step out of the will of God from time to time, but God can still use it. There are times we make mistakes. There are times we're going to be rejected. But in it all, if we will stay with God, if we will surrender to Him, if we will just trust Him in it all, we're still going to find we're blessed. That's all I have. God bless you all. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you Sunday.